Hello YouTube, welcome back to Nutkin Farm. I thought I'd start with a somewhat peaceful site. This is a little swimming hole, if you like, just below the artist's studio on my property, and it's a lovely peaceful place, and it's a place of running water you might be able to hear in the background, and fills up that pond, and it eventually runs down via this creek and bridge. It's a bit overgrown with grass, into the dam, which is a little bit off in the distance there. So lovely to have that running water here, because it's otherwise a very dry time of year, and I've been doing some mowing, and the amount of dust I've been throwing up, particularly from the exposed ground, reveals that, you know, the soil surface is in fact dry. We're supposed to get our first rains at the end of September tomorrow. And so it's a nice day for getting some work done, although it's a bit of a stinker. Forecast to be 31 degrees, so we're really sort of getting into that fight between spring and summer. I've taken you to block 7 of my orchard for a reason, because after you get past all the peaceful water and everything, you're going to come across a scene of relative carnage. And what I've been doing here isn't so much pruning. It looks like pruning, and if you look at Garth's videos on the Australian Macadamia channel, his pruning videos tend to show a bit of this debris all over the place. What I've done here, though, is a process called skirting, and it's something this block has never had, so I really, to not muck around, I really had to go in fairly hard, and I'll show you what skirting is. Before I trimmed these trees, there were low branches all over the place, and in fact you can see by the bare ground that there was no light getting in at ground level, and the worst of all is you couldn't get machinery in at ground level either. So when it comes to mowing, harvesting, whatever you want to do, you really had a problem with a lot of these branches stopping you from doing the work you want to do. And so it's been an exercise in removing the lowest hanging branches of trees to get your machinery access back, and also to remove gunk. In a lot of cases there's basal shoots of root stock, there was privet growing up through some of the trees, there was lantana, there were tobacco leaf trees. I don't know what they call them, I think they call them tobacco trees. But I thought that, what started off as a fairly small exercise then became really quite a large exercise in removing these branches. Now, on Monday or Tuesday next week, and I don't know if I'll be able to video it for you, we're going to get a visit from Bertie. Who's Bertie? Well, it's really a it, not a who. Bertie is the name of a mulching maker company from Italy. They do some really heavy duty mulches, get dragged behind very big tractors, and they can, believe it or not, chew up branches like this and turn them into smithereens. It's not quite as pretty as doing it for example, doing it with a chipper, which is the gold standard. Any macadamia farmer will tell you that a chipper gives you a nice fine grade of wood chip, very workable. It doesn't cause interference with any machinery like harvesters that come along. You don't want them picking up large chunks of wood, because that can gunk up the works. But Bertie's going to have its work cut out for it, I'm afraid, because some of these branches, particularly as the blocks went steeper, were really quite thick at the base, and according to my contractor, he reckons it can chip up boughs as big as this. My answer to that is, we'll see. We'll see what gets left behind, because we've actually taken low cuts down as part of the skirting process. That's just barely a metre off the ground, and I'd say, well, there's my hand, I'd say it's not 10 centimetres thick, but it's certainly thick. Now, the heartbreaking part of this, as you can see, is that I've cut off valuable flower. This is all stuff which would possibly have contributed to nut set on these trees. Why would I do that, particularly in a bumper year? It seems like madness. Gosh, you know, at times I still think it is madness. But then I have to remind myself, this block in particular has been close to unharvestable. Each time I've had a harvest done here, usually in the wet season, because these are fairly early dropping trees, every time I've had a harvest done here, they've said, look, we can't manage these slopes. They're either too steep or too wet, and even a big four-wheel drive Carraro with 4 massive tyres has trouble on these slopes. Then when you had branches leaning down almost all the way to the ground, we had another issue in that the Carraro harvester head couldn't really safely get under there and pick up the nuts. So at the end of every season that I've been here anyway, you've got all these nuts on the ground from these low-hanging branches, but they never end up in my bank account and they never end up in people's mouths. And so for the first time, I suspect, in the life of these trees, I've had to actually do some pretty heartbreaking work and chop off some wholesale branches. Now, the rule of applied, and I've made this up largely myself, although my agronomist said this is how to do it. You want to make cuts a few centimetres off the trunk. Don't try and cut at the trunk, or else you're going to cause too much damage to the tree. So a few centimetres off like that. Yes, you end up with a few wounds, and here's an example where I've cut through, and then as the branch has fallen, it's cut a bit more off than I wanted. Unfortunate, and I know you can sort of counter that by doing an undercut first, but you know, there it is. And so the steeper the slope, the actual more basal branches I got, and so, you know, there's another example of a big cut going through, which hopefully Bertie will be able to come along and munch up. And particularly as you go up to the steeper slopes here, which is really the steepest land I have on the property that grows macadamias, a lot of the branches of the trees, they don't, you know, they just want the food. And when they're on a steep slope, there's sun coming at them from sort of lots of sideways angles as well as on top. Of course, you're going to get these side growths. Now, this tree in front of you has been turned into an almost normal looking macadamia tree. But before that, it had bushing literally down to the ground. And you can see all those limbs where they've been removed. I've actually removed, I'd say, close to half the tree. And you can see the bare ground underneath it where no grass or ground cover has been able to grow ever. And the idea, particularly if it rains tomorrow, is to brave the rain and come along with some clover seed and dig some clover seed in and hope that it germinates, because we're coming into a bit of a rainy week with any luck. So this block has now been transformed from hopefully an unworkable block to hopefully, well, unfortunately an unworkable block to hopefully a workable one. And the same pattern applies. And the rule I did was that the steeper the grade, the more the skirt, the higher the skirt. So in other words, you're leaving more room for machinery to get under, a bit more room for ground cover. And that way you can hopefully manage harvesting, mowing, those sorts of tasks better into the future. And you can just see in front of you the amount of volume that this part of the orchard has been lost. Timing wise, did I do the right timing? Post flowering, obviously, the tree has put some effort into these flowers, and ideally, this energy is going to go to waste. I suppose it's all going to go to mulch. But yes, if you could do it before flowering, in a way, it's not bad. But usually before flowering, you're harvesting, so that's not really the time to do it. The timing considerations here were also to be in time for a mulch generally in the orchard, whether any old nut is basically crunched up to limit macadamia seed weevil, also to improve the general health of the orchard floor. What I'm also having done This year is what's called a hay rake, which is where a stiff broom, like a road broom, comes along the centre of the rows in my older blocks and sweeps debris from the centre back to under the tree roots, basically doing in reverse the effect of what harvesting does, which tends to move soil away from the tree roots as they sweep nuts up. So when the mulch is here, get it to do the work. But yeah, post-flowering, you can do it. The only time you don't want to do it is post-shedding, and that's a period in which a tree regulates how many nuts it's going to get. A tree will take a bit of a stock take, work out how many nuts can I support. And it's so long as you do any pruning or skirting before the tree makes that decision, then it will factor what it has currently into that. And so these remaining flowers post-skirting, there's going to be some nuts. There's some healthy looking nuts there. The bees are still working on it. Oh, and by the way, when you're working with a chainsaw and a bee gets angry at you, don't wave the chainsaw at an angry bee. It doesn't make it happier. Don't ask how I know. I just know. Accept me on that. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Anyway, so this hopefully is going to be a nicely mulched block. The mulching will also handle sort of effectively mowing for me as well for that block. But there's some mowing around the headlands and things that you need to do to support the process. Skirting is something that doesn't have to be done every year. In fact, it doesn't have to be done for many years at a time, so long as you do it right. It's just one of those things where someone for this block had to bite the bullet, and I decided that someone would be me. Right, well, I'm sorry if any of this fallen macadamia foliage has distressed anyone. It really isn't all that bad though, and my agronomist keeps reassuring me that I won't lose crop over it because there's still plenty of flower on the tree to give me the nuts that the tree was going to bear anyway. That sounds good. I want to believe it. When I see these dead flowers on the ground, it's hard to believe it. But you've got to have faith in your agronomist and faith in the process. And then if I need to calm myself down, well, there's always one hell of a beautiful dam to look at and soothe me. So thanks for coming on the walk with me, guys. I'll be back again soon. Have a lovely day. Bye for now.